Welcome to UNCAGED. Today we're speaking with James Fountain. James is doing all the stuff that we all dream about doing, but he's actually making it happen. He has a long career in the sustainability space as a leader in kind of working on all those lovely ESG challenges that companies have faced. But more interestingly, he's really moved in as a fellow at the Explorers Club and the Royal Geographical Society, and he's working on sustainability storytelling and some really, really exciting projects. We'll get into all of those things today. But before we get there, James, tell us a little bit about you and your career.
Yeah, thanks again for having me on the show, Brant. I really appreciate
Absolutely.
it. This is a good opportunity and great to meet you personally. So my background, as you mentioned, is in sustainability. I've got a long career doing it. I started my career with the National Geographic Society, way back, and that was really making maps at the time. So I was a cartographer for them. That slowly evolved into a master's degree in cultural geography from the University of Montana, and then on to the United Nations, and then a bunch of Big Four consulting from there on, to where I've consulted organizations on everything from the climate strategy, to their sustainability strategy, to their ESG strategy. So all things in between at the strategic level. Usually coming in with a C-suite and helping them to define, what their transition toward a sustainable organization looks like,
Wow.
or decarbonized organization looks like, and then work with my team to build out the roadmap and strategy from there. Most recently, though, however, I'm working on, spending a lot of time on several of my side projects. You know,
Oh, well, let's get into that. I mean, we're definitely living in a moment where sustainability is discussed almost constantly in the media in some form or fashion. You can't have big events like Davos without this sitting centrally in the discussion. But I
totally.
mean, now you're working on some very interesting projects. Tell me a little bit about what you're excited about and some of these latest projects.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, so recently, I'm just wrapping up. Probably by the end of this week, I will finish the draft of the fourth book in a four-book series that will begin coming out in January. And the series is called Our Changing World. It's really taking a look at several different aspects of sustainability. Everything from, and it's also kind of centered around a cultural perspective and a multicultural approach towards solving the sustainability and the climate crisis that we're in. First book hits that specifically. But the second book is kind of like the past, present, and future of sustainability, the current state of sustainability. The
Hmm.
third is on social justice and social rights, environmental justice, that's how sustainability. And then the fourth book, the final book, will be on sustainable business. Where we are,
Wow.
where I think it's going. What we need to do as entrepreneurs and business executives to facilitate the successful transition into sustainable business in a sustainable strategy. And it's not the whole thing is meant for anybody interested in sustainability. It's not just business folks. So that's a book series I have coming out. I also am a documentarian, so I'm working on a documentary with the Republic of Uzbekistan at the moment, to where we'll be taking a look at their protected natural areas, and how community-led conservation is being facilitated to ensure their longevity of those areas. So basically what they're doing, Uzbekistan, traditionally has had some challenges, environmentally speaking, with the Aral
Hmm.
Sea. If you don't know the Aral, if anybody in the audience does not know about the Aral Sea, it's worth looking up to see what has happened to it. A lot of it's post-Soviet legacy, but they're making significant strides in ameliorating a lot of their environmental issues. And they're doing that with communities who live there. They're incorporating community folks around there, so it's a really good success story. Another project I'm working on right now is a docuseries. One of the organizations I work with is the Explorers Club. We'll probably get into that
Hmm.
at some point. And through the Explorers Club, I've had an opportunity to, meet a lot of really interesting folks. And part of that is I'm riding a motorcycle around the world, to very remote communities and indigenous communities, and really getting their take on how climate change and biodiversity loss and global development is impacting them. And taking a
Hmm.
look at, historically, from your children's generation to yours, to your antecedents, how is it impacting your culture? And we're working with a group right now to turn that into a docu-series, and a couple
Wow.
other fun projects, all around telling the story of sustainability, and how its impact is affecting us as a global citizen.
That's amazing. I mean, these stories are so critical right now and so pertinent for the world that we're experiencing and the changes that we're living through and trying to find answers. I mean, I know, and you have such an interesting background, James, because you've worked with many, many companies in the space and now you're working on telling these stories. When you look at the situation today for businesses, what is it that's kind of top of mind? What are they focusing on, and are we making progress to hopefully, alleviate some of these challenges?
That is a heated question about whether or not we are making progress. But I take an optimistic approach toward it, and yes, I believe that we are making approaches or making progress toward it. ESG is kind of a controversial topic, at least here in the States, and depending on where you live in the States, which side of the aisle you sit on. I think ESG is actually helping, with the movement. If nothing else, what ESG does is it raises awareness and it provides a level of accountability, to organizations that can be counted and measured and viewed at it by investors, who can determine whether or not, your organization based upon, a new set of materiality, which is effectively, traditionally we look at financial materiality. What are the financial factors that determine the value of a business? When we look at non-financial materiality in ESG, environmental, social, and governance, corporate governance, we look at non-financial materiality. We look at things like, where are you getting your source products from? Do they have, is that source product at risk of erosion or running out of water, or human rights issues,
Hmm.
and we look at those things that may change the way investors value businesses. So that's what we call non-financial materiality. Those things that can determine the value of a business that is not necessarily financial on the
Mm.
surface. So I think ESG is helping with that. I think that we are as a global, globally, I think that we are getting a better understanding of what sustainability is
Hmm.
and where it's going, what needs to happen. The challenge, I think, that right now is at the policy level. I think, a lot of the big organizations get it. A lot of the big organizations are actually implementing sound sustainability strategies that are not required of them by their government, by policy.
Right.
It's getting policy and, in the larger, and I'll say this too, the fossil fuel actors, and it's getting them on board and in play to understand that those are the areas that need to change to really uh, project us toward a sustainable world.
I mean, it's an interesting one. I feel like we're at one of those moments where we're taking steps forward, but then kind of we're learning kind of the challenges with things that have been put in place, and then we're moving steps forward again, and then stepping back a bit. Yeah, last couple of weeks I was reading about how some of these organizations, the universities in California, were basically saying that they were going to drop some of the carbon structures that they were focused on to get to kind of carbon neutral because, in essence, some of their partners they didn't feel had ethical practices or even effective practices. What do you make of all of those challenges?
I think what you're describing is what we call like an ethical divestiture. Where we're,
Mm,
we're divesting our interest in an organization because, they have poor practices. Now, I'm
mm,
generally not a fan of that. I mean, to me, that's like a last resort. I mean, to me, I think a more sound approach is to, instead of penalize, the organization and cancel them, as we may say, and, because cancel culture is a thing here in the States.
yeah.
Rather than do that, my suggestion to organizations would be to, work with them to help them be a more sustainable organization themselves because it will help you ultimately. Sorry to wax on this for a second here, but
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
what a lot of organizations don't understand, it's like when you go in when you go transitioning to a sustainability mindset and sustainability operations, really what we're talking about is it's just probably history's largest organizational change management effort. You know, we're changing corporate paradigm. That's it. We used to think this way, now we're
Yeah.
thinking this way. We used to do this, now we're doing this. But to do this requires an investment. It's not a
Hmm.
cost. Sustainability does not belong in a cost center. It actually belongs in the investment center. Because what's happening is, granted, there is an upfront cost, which could be helping that organization, with their sustainability initiatives.
Hmm.
Maybe you give them incentives, some sort of financial incentivization to green their business and green their operations. In the long run, those cost savings they're going to get from going green, because going green almost always goes towards cost savings. It benefits your organization long term. So again, it's shifting from short-term investment to long-term viability of the organization.
So, I mean, you clearly have a deep, deep passion for sustainability, and you've spent your career working on it, and you're certainly working on some great projects. But how do you incorporate, I would say, not only your passion, but your expertise in sustainability in the way you tell these stories?
And that's the biggest thing, about the sustainability movement, I think. Given the position I've had at several organizations and recently, one of the things I've learned the most is a lot of organizations understand the metrics. They
Hmm.
understand the numbers and the dollars and cents and the KPIs and all the metrics they need to go sustainable, but they don't get the why, you know?
Mm.
And I think storytelling, whether it be in the form of just sitting on stage and telling a story, whether it be by book, by TV, by movie, I think it really hits that why. I think when you can hit somebody, I mean, if a story is done well, or effectively, a story hits somebody at the emotive level, you know, and the emotive level, the emotions incite change. If there's that person who's on the fence about, I guess, sustainability, but it's expensive, it's a lot of work, it's a headache. But if you can get them emotively, if you can get them to see why the change is necessary, not just for the Accord or Bhutan, but for you, band, and for
Yeah.
me, business owner, if you can get them to understand that, that incites change, that incites progress, and that is how sustainability will go forward.
Yeah. I also think just based on the conversation with you, James, and looking at your background, one of the things that clearly pops out is because you have such a clear sense of the broader issues that enterprises and governments are facing, when you actually have these acute conversations with people in local diverse communities,
Yeah.
you're able to pinpoint questions that perhaps wouldn't have come to just a general documentarian. I think that's to me clearly gotta be a strength of how you tell your stories.
Thank you so much for saying that and for picking that up, actually. In business, those of us who are familiar with Six Sigma, they understand the concept of going to the Gemba.
Yeah.
And going to the Gemba is effectively, I'm going to butcher the true definition of this. So all you Six Sigma out there, I apologize. But it's essentially, the executive team going to the ground level, and understanding how every part of the organization works from the ground level, from the guy putting the toy in the box on the assembly line, up to, the senior vice president who reports to you. It's understanding how that works. When I do this trip, from a business perspective, mind you, from a business perspective, this is me going to the, this is me seeing, where all this sustainability jargon and mumbo jumbo that I preach to these executives, this is me seeing it in action, seeing how it's really playing out. And, and
Yeah.
it, and it frames my narrative in speaking to them.
Yeah.
But more importantly, when I go to these areas, I understand the concept and the perspective of the people who are really living, living the detriments of the global north or the global west's approach toward business over the last several decades. They're
Yeah.
heading west. So I hear from them, and they have solutions because they've been living it.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's one of those things that I think perhaps a lot of us, that have been around for a while in the business world, worked in big companies and little companies and, played strategic roles and very tactical roles. And, the best laid strategy falls apart if you can't make the right decisions in the room, right? And so
Absolutely.
I think it's the same thing applies to almost every area of life. So if there may be a grand plan in some boardroom somewhere, but if the aid doesn't get somewhere, or if the systems don't get implemented correctly, or the processes get blocked because of a local ritual that hasn't been factored in, I can imagine it causes a lot of challenges.
You got it. And it's as I say, data leads to insights, insights leads to decision, but again, storytelling, lived experience, again, going to the Gemba, I encourage all leaders to do this, go to the Gemba. You
Yeah.
know, lived experience, storytelling leads to the action. It leads to getting it done. It incites movement.
Well,
So
James, I mean, you're working on a lot of really interesting projects. And so I'm imagining that it's hard to pick your favorite baby amongst all of them. But what's giving you the most joy right now from your work? And really, when you work on one of these things, how do you really make sure that you're amplifying the impact of those stories that you're telling?
yeah, I mean, lately, giving me the most joy is actually going to bed at night. It's
Ah,
been
ah,
it's been breakneck. I mean, I really have a lot going on right now. But a lot of the joy comes just simply in making the difference. It's so easy in corporate America to institute a sustainability strategy and be really disconnected from it. Simply being another business process, that you're
mm,
implementing, or another thing that the senior executive team says we have to do. Just knowing that I'm making a difference, I get a lot of joy in that. And amplification. Again, I work with indigenous communities in very remote communities. That's where my focus of sustainability sets in. So I'm not telling their stories per se. Really what I'm trying to do is use my privilege as a, middle-aged white guy from the West. You try to use the platform that I have to amplify their story
yeah,
and help the rest of our world know that, yeah, we got science on our side, but science is only one way of understanding the world. There are many other perspectives and paradigms that can go into a sustainability strategy or global decarbonization plans, you know, and helping to bring that awareness, to the West. I get a lot of satisfaction because it can ultimately it can change policy.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
what we need to do. We need to change policy to make sure indigenous rights are reserved and respected. Excuse me.
So, James, along the way today, you mentioned that you're an optimist. It's always wonderful to talk to someone who's a sustainability expert who's an optimist. Gives me tremendous hope. But tell me a little bit about your thoughts for the near future. I mean, here we are entering 24. What's on the docket for 2024 that you'd say is of note, and what's on the docket for you?
Well, I mean, I guess globally, yeah, I think our youth is what's on the docket. I mean, in 2024, we're going to have another election here in the
Mm,
States, you know, and our youth has a voice, and our youth is very concerned, from my interactions with them, from my lectures at universities and other engagements. The youth is very concerned about the environment. So I have a lot of faith in Gen Z and younger generations in helping to dig us out of this situation that our generations put us in here, you
yeah.
know, through the vote. So look forward toward the 2024 election here in the States. Internationally, I think the same thing. A lot of youth is mobilizing. Now, here in my home state of Montana, you know, high school kids want a landmark decision, against some oil companies in Montana that infringed upon their right to have a healthy ecosystem and healthy environment. I checked that one out. That was pretty good. Of course, Greta and a lot of the young activists around. So the youth is what I'm ambitious about. I think decarbonization strategies, coming out of COP, I think there were some wins. I think there's some losses at a COP, so I see renewable energies coming, being on the horizon, green hydrogen, more solar, more wind power, a lot of the newer alternative energies making a stronger stance next year. And of course, ESG, I mean, once the SEC finally releases their guidance, I can see a big boon in organizations picking up their ESG strategies. Sorry for the long-windedness.
No, no, no. I mean, I
There's a
think
lot.
it bodes, I think, really for a year that will be perhaps emblematic of where we are, where we're going to go. It's absolutely right. It's an election year, and that will be telling on what is the agenda going forward. It's interesting to me. I would say that before COVID, there was definitely a lot of stuff that seemed to be happening from the United Nations and from
Yeah.
Davos. And it does seem to me that some of those things are taking shape. I know that there's a lot of challenges on things like, the right way to measure ESG, the right way
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
measure the involvement that companies have in terms of moving towards kind of a carbon zero footprint mentality.
Yeah.
And I suppose that will continue. There'll probably hopefully be a moment where we all somehow agree that we're going to go with VHS instead of beta, the beta, there'll be the agreement
I
on,
have no
on
idea what you're talking about. I don't know what VHS for beta is.
Oh, well, okay. Yeah, probably nobody will know. But, finding the pathways that we can agree, perhaps imperfect, but at least somehow good enough for us to get to the next phase of topics. And James, probably some of your stories that are going to be coming out will help shape the direction as well. If
That's
someone
right.
wanted to learn more about what you're working on, where's the best place to reach you?
James-fountain.com is my website. I also have a link site where it needs to be updated though. But my website is currently under construction. Yeah. So if and depending on when this gets actually published, give it a day or two. But my website, James-Fountain, or of course LinkedIn.
Excellent, excellent. Well, James, thank you so much for being on the Uncaged show today. We've been speaking with James Fountain, and we've been talking broadly about the sustainability space. He is a leader in that space and has worked with many, many enterprises, but now is working on storytelling in the space. He's a fellow at the Explorers Club and the Royal Geographical Society. He has books coming out, docuseries coming out, documentary films coming out. James Fountain, thank you so much for being on the show, and we look forward to having you back.
Grant, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for the engaging conversation.
Cheers.